Hello, hello, my name is Clark Heron, aka the Hairy Hobo, and welcome to AKA Sports. Yes, we had a nice little week off enjoying the Thanksgiving holidays, but with me, as always, is Fletch. Fletch, hopefully your Thanksgiving holiday was good. Always good to see the family. Was there anything exciting that happened during the family get together for the holidays?
Not too much, not too much, man. I'm glad we're back though. I just got to enjoy the family down here in South Carolina, my new home. Enjoyed Thanksgiving, and that was pretty much it, man. It's pretty chill. Watched some football, of course, and over the last 2 weeks, we've seen a lot happen in the sports world. So, but we'll kick it back over, man. How was the week off, and how was your Thanksgiving?
It was good. Always good to see the family. Food is always good. Have a ton of leftovers, which is never a problem. Especially
Never.
when the work boss gives you 3 pounds of honey glazed turkey. Uh, so
Oh, nice.
yeah, I had quite the feast for quite a bit. I am turkeyed out, but uh, I'm definitely not sportsed out, and as you said, over the last couple of weeks, we've had quite a bit happen in the sports world. We won't cover every little bit because a lot of it everyone has heard about for at least a full week. We'll try and touch on some of the bigger ones that's happened here recently, especially within the last 24 hours. Obviously, we'll be talking about obviously our college football, our NFL stuff, along with some Major League Baseball as well. Before we get into it, the one big piece of news that we were keeping an eye on one of our previous podcasts was the NFL's lawsuit from the city of St. Louis, all dating back to when Stan Grunke had pulled the Rams out of St. Louis to go to Inglewood, California. They have come to an agreement, a nice little settlement for the city of St. Louis. They have not yet decided how to spend their money, but all $790 million worth is now in their pockets, and they haven't quite decided by the NFL who is going to pay that between the owners and how much Stan Kroenke is going to pay. But an interesting note that comes out of that is that there was no promise in that settlement that the NFL was going to allow a team to go back to St. Louis, which I found a little interesting there. Fletch, first I got to ask, what in the world are you going to do with $790 million in the city of St. Louis? But number two, like, do you believe that maybe sometime in the future a team returns back to St. Louis?
Very good questions. I'm good with the settlement. The 790 million. I mean, is that am I saying that right? Million?
Million, yes.
Okay. So I mean, we talking. Yeah, that's well over three-quarters of $1 billion. So I mean, personally, what I would love to see happen with St. Louis, I don't think you to answer one question that you asked me. I don't think you get another football team there. If it does happen, it's going to be a long time. What I am interested in though is other leagues have mentioned St. Louis. I know the NBA is always looking to expand. I would not be surprised if we see in the next 20 years NBA the league gets up to 32, 34, maybe even up to 35, 36 teams just with their aggressiveness, aggressive way of talking about expansion, the things that they do globally and how big the game is becoming across the world. I would like to see St. Louis, the city of St. Louis, definitely use some of the money towards, whatever it is necessary for the city. Maybe that's infrastructure, maybe that's, uh, schools, things like that. But then what I really would like to see them do is attract another pro team. This would be a perfect opportunity to start talking with the NBA and see if that's something they would like to do. The NBA does have other interest in like Seattle. I've heard Louisville even, and I mean, if there's no basketball team right now, technically they're in St. Louis, so that would be interesting. Also would be interesting too. That would technically be considered a West team, which kind of fits the AFC West for the Kansas City football team. So, who's nearby? So the whole thing is very interesting. The settlement was interesting too, Clark. But I would think that I think they would need to or would want to attract another sports team because they made a big hoopla about a sports team leaving. So why not bring something else in that people can go see and one it's also another thing it's going to help generate revenue.
Correct. Yeah, they definitely have to find a way to do so, and I think one of the biggest ways that they'll use that money is to revamp the stadium that was already there, that was being used by the Rams organization when they were in
Mm,
St. Louis. They have to get that revamped. That was one of the big points beyond the fact that they just wanted to get up and out, was the fact that the stadium was a little bit outdated. It definitely needed some renovation. So I'm guessing that's where the majority of the money, or a good chunk of the money, is going to go. But to your point as well, definitely would like to see, not just for sports related, but go to the city of St. Louis and help the infrastructure across the board, to not only make it a nice destination city for tourism, but also make it a destination city for a professional team to put up shop as well. So
right.
again, very interesting. I think the target number was originally somewhere over $1 billion, like 1.2, 1.3, but they were able to
Mm,
settle on the 790. But like I said earlier, it was very interesting that the NFL did not put in that settlement specifically that they would be guaranteeing a team back in St. Louis, because I know they still have ideas of going overseas to potentially London, or having a team in Canada or Mexico, something along
right.
those lines. So congratulations for the city of St. Louis. I think they truly won this. I think they knew that they had the NFL put in a corner, and the NFL did not. The biggest thing with this case was the city of St. Louis and the judge was trying to get uh, all the financial information from the NFL, and there was a judge pushing for it, and it was going to happen had they not reached the settlement. So the owners do not want that information public. So they did whatever they could to make sure that did not happen. And that is why the
Mm.
city of St. Louis is now $790 million richer.
That's nice, man. That's nice
Yes.
for them too. The other thing that's really nice that I was interested. I thought they had a soccer team, but they're getting a soccer team, and there's already a stadium for that as well. Um, they're planning to start playing March of 2023, so not this next season coming up, but the season after. So I mean, you got soccer, you have I believe yeah they have hockey because they got the Blues. You've got baseball, obviously, with the cards there. And I mean, if you can add basketball, I mean, you lost football. If you got to add basketball, that would definitely help. So, um, yeah, man, that's like I said, very interesting information here. But we'll see what happens here in the next few years with St. Louis for sure.
Yeah, it would be very interesting if they added an NBA team there, and then also added a team in Kentucky, and kind of made that more of like a little bit of a rivalry between those two.
Yes.
Would make things very interesting. But we'll keep an eye on that, see what happens as time progresses on. Let us go ahead and move on into the news and notes. Speaking of basketball, college basketball, we were keeping an eye on a major game before we had our week-long break. It was number one versus number two at the time, Gonzaga versus UCLA, and let's just say it wasn't much of a game. Gonzaga winning that game by 20 points, even though the Bruins were led by transfer from the previous year. Johnny Juzang led the team in scoring. But as quickly as I thought Gonzaga would still be the dominant number one, they went and played Duke the following week, and Duke won that game. Surprisingly, I know Duke is a very good team. They beat Kentucky earlier this season. They handled their business against Gonzaga, and had to give them their due. They looked really, really good. And Duke is one of those teams that they have some very talented players all across the board. It's not quite like those years that we've seen in years past where you had Zion Williamson and then some really good players around him, but nothing overly great. It was really Zion and then everybody else. No, this team is legit. And then what happens? They go on and play Tuesday at Ohio State, a team that's not ranked currently. Been a little bit of a slide, and they were winning at the half by quite a bit. I think it's 43-25 at the half. And then they just decided they didn't want to make any more baskets for the second half, and ended up losing that game in surprising fashion. Unfortunately, I did not watch the second half. I wish I did. I just looked at the box score knowing that Ohio State was going to struggle from the free throw line. They missed half their free throws, but yet still won that game. Fans stormed the court. A
Hmm.
great win for Ohio State. And again, this was a team, and we mentioned it off air, that they made the tournament last year, were really, really good. They faltered early in the first round just because Kyle Young was missing. It was kind of like their missing link last year, and they ran into a very, very hot 3-point shooting team in that tournament. Um,
Mhm.
but this is still a very talented team that can play. But granted, wasn't Duke's second half night for sure, but a great win for Ohio State. Fletch, you wanted to bring up the current, I think, the current standings for the ACC Big Ten Challenge.
Yeah, it's kind of been a staple in college basketball for quite some time, really, man. I had to go back and see. I thought it started around 2000. It did start in '99. This year, we'll start with that. This year, the Big Ten did just clinch that. They play, I believe, 14 games, if I'm not mistaken.
Mm-hmm.
So first one to eight basically is the winner. So 8-6 was the score on that. For a while, it was pretty out of hand. To be honest with you, Big Ten went up 4-0 at one point, 5-1 at another point, and going after the Ohio State Duke win, it was 6-2 for the Big Ten. And then after that, the ACC made a push, and then I believe Wisconsin was the last game, which put them over at 8-6, if I've had that right. But very interesting challenge. The one thing I wanted to bring up with this challenge, man, is just how it's changed over the years and kind of going more into the landscape of college basketball. Um, the first 10 years of it, the ACC won from 99 up to 2008. ACC, obviously had Duke, it had Carolina. At this point, I believe they did have Louisville. No, I'm sorry, Louisville's in the Big Ten. They had what is it?
The Big
I know,
East.
of course, they've always had the ACC. The conferences were a little bit differently aligned because the
Mm-hmm.
Big Ten didn't have um, Maryland. The ACC did not have Louisville. That was actually like Conference USA and then Big East. So those are some things that have changed over the years. But the ACC reigned supreme for a while with obviously Duke, Carolina. Then you have Virginia, who became very good at that point. Miami had a spurt during that time frame as well. So I just kind of took a look at that. I saw a stat on TV. It was like the first 10 years, Big Ten was like, or the record was 8-2 in favor of the ACC. Then if you look at the current 10 years, it's essentially been a flip with a few ties in between. But the ACC has only won twice since the turn of the decade. So it's just showing you the whole landscape changing in college basketball. It's being very a lot of parity, more so than most other sports, and that's something that we're seeing in football, for instance, this year. So I just kind of wanted to bring that up, and I think this is always like a precursor moving forward because it kind of tells you who's a good team, who's not so good team. Then also too, when we start looking at how many teams these conferences are putting in the tournament, this is something that I know is always coming to play because it does create a lot of really interesting matchups. It gives you head to head that you normally wouldn't have, and then also if you've noticed a couple other conferences that follow suit. Like I know the Big 12 and the Big East have a challenge going on currently. So just something to look out for college basketball fans out there as the season progresses and as the years progress. Also, just how the whole landscape is with the power. I think Power Six, you could say in college hoops, and then also with your mid majors. So
Agreed, and it's always a fun time to watch the Big Ten ACC Challenge. Uh, each and every year, just because, like you said, seeing like North Carolina, Ohio State, or a Duke, Wisconsin, that sort of thing, those type of matchups, kind of gives you the March Madness vibe that we all know we're craving. We're not quite fully there yet, but we're slowly creeping there. We're still watching a lot of these games that unfortunately don't have a whole lot of actual value to them until we get into conference play. But uh, just a little bit of a teaser before we get to the new year, and then we start craving that March Madness once we get past the NFL and college football and that sort of
oh
thing.
yeah.
Let's stick with basketball just on the professional side of things. Anything in the NBA that's caught your interest over the last couple weeks?
Yeah, the NBA's been very, very interesting over the last couple weeks. Obviously, the two hottest teams in basketball are the Suns, obviously, and then the Golden State Warriors. I believe right now, as I look at the standings, we recall more recently, the biggest matchup of the season so far was that Phoenix Golden State matchup that just happened a few days back, where Phoenix pulled it off. Steph had his worst game, and honestly, I think in the last couple of years. And Phoenix has tied their franchise record of 17 wins in a row and now are standing at 18-3 with the tiebreaker, putting them in first place in the West. And then obviously we have the big primetime matchup on Friday night on ESPN with these two matching up again as they swap. This a home and home series kind of thing. That they do every blue moon in the NBA. But it's been a fun season so far, Clark. There haven't really been a ton of surprises at all, with the exception of still the Washington Wizards, who I'm still kind of shocked they're number two out west or out east. Um, that's been the biggest shock. I mean, Cleveland playing very well still is also somewhat of a shock. And then some teams are struggling just due to injury, and that's not shocking. Also, one thing just to point out, man, with the league right now, this is something that kind of came up recently, just with the whole flexing of the primetime game. We understand LeBron at this point was ruled out with COVID, and actually today, as we record, just a few hours prior, he was he's allowed to play Friday because he has two negative COVID tests. It was COVID protocol he was sitting out for, not because he was sick. So he'll be back Friday night. However, they flexed out a Lakers Clippers game for this game. You're never really going to flex out a LeBron James. So this leads me to pose this question, Clark. We know Steph Curry has changed the league. We see so many more players coming in, not so much playing just like Steph, but there's a lot of his elements that you see in a lot of younger players that are coming in right now. Also, the league in general is clearly at an all-time high as far as three-point attempts and just the way that's that's played. It's changed the way the calls have been made. There's much more details on foul calls for shooters now than there ever has been before. Is Steph Curry the face of the league now, Clark?
At this point, you would almost have to say so. I mean, I know LeBron's still there, but this is a much older LeBron than what they're typically used to. And with Steph, like
Mm-hmm.
you mentioned, there's a lot of players that are emulating his game. I remember watching him play at Davidson and just having a lightning fast release and
Mm-hmm.
just seeing him climb up the three-point board as quickly as he has comparative to what we're typically used to, but that's a sign of the times of changing with how the NBA's played and how, you're looking for an offense that basically shoots threes. We want a big man that shoots threes. We don't want the inside guy anymore because we get more points for shooting a three, which again we've talked a little bit before about potentially seeing the NBA change yet again in this far future or maybe even close future about potentially adding in a 4-point shot, maybe even a 5-point shot. It continues to evolve. It might take a little bit to get to that point, but Steph Curry, like you mentioned, being basically the face of the NBA, he continues to dominate. He's my age. He's 34 years old, uh, and he's just dominating without Klay Thompson, who's still not there. I know he just went to the G League along with James Wiseman, so both of them are getting close to coming back, but they're not quite there yet. But
Mm-hmm.
yeah, at this point, I wouldn't argue with Steph Curry being the face of the league at this point, but there's going to be a few others if you wanted. It's definitely nothing. It's nothing concrete anymore. It's not clear cut. Hey, this is the absolute face of the league. You could put in several different other players, but I would think if you asked 100 people, I would say a majority of them might stay or might say Steph Curry at this point.
Yeah, I think so too. I think it might be safe to say that it is very hard to argue against LeBron because I think just the casual fan, when NBA, LeBron, that's the first person you think of. Now for some casual fans, that has kind of flipped, and for the people that actually watch, like you and myself, it's starting to become more so Steph than really a Durant or a LeBron or even a Giannis. Giannis also is very high up on that list as well, and I think, like you said, it is kind of a gray spot right now who that might be. So just something very interesting, a storyline, I guess you could say, some type of a more of an overarching storyline. You ask somebody else, they'll tell you Steph Curry may have been in the face of the league for years now. Um, some people truly may believe that. So it's all kind of just perceived on, I think, how you view the game and what do you consider somebody being, say, the face of the league as well. So it is still a matter of opinion, but I think it is something that's more gray than it has been really since LeBron's dominance over the last decade and a half.
Yeah, once we've gotten past that, we're starting to get into a lot of different names that you could put out there. And what maybe one of the more interesting names that are out there is the Joker's brothers, who show up and are on TV everywhere. I won't go into detail about
Yeah,
that, but they are definitely getting some big publicity as well. Anything else in the NBA
love it.
before we move on to fights?
No, not really, man. I mean, we're a quarter of the way in though, so it's time for teams to kind of kick it into gear. Like you mentioned, some people coming back off injury. That's what I'm excited about next. Is the Klay Thompsons of the world, the Kawhi Leonards of the world, potentially Kyrie Irvings of the world. I would love to see Ben Simmons back on the court. I'm really hoping some guys come back very soon. Dame Lillard is dealing with the injury that he suffered over and when he's playing overseas or for Team USA, an abdominal injury, so he's out for 10 days, and that kind of tells me a little bit the reason why they're slumping. He's slumping a little bit. So yeah, man, just some. I'm waiting for guys to come back. Jamal Murray is another one. I can't leave him out as well. So that's really all for the league right now. The NBA, like you mentioned, man, we can move over to the fight scene here. Um, there's been two fights since our last podcast here, Clark. I'll talk about the more recent one, just being a little bit more fresh on our minds, and that's George Kambosos upsetting Teofimo Lopez. Um, Clark, Teofimo Lopez was considered definitely a top 10 pound for pound boxer in the world. Some people top five. Some people thought he may be invincible in his weight class, with the exception of Javante Davis, who we've been kind of waiting for that super fight to happen in the next year or so. However, George Kambosos had other plans. He came out and essentially he shocked the world, to be honest with you. A lot of people won some money that night, I'm assuming. A lot of people lost a lot of money because that was something that a lot of people did not see coming. So it was a split decision. But the interesting thing about this fight, Clark, there was no rematch clause. Kambosos is free to fight whoever the hell he decides to fight, and I think that's great for the sport. I don't think every boxing match needs a rematch. I don't care how close it is. It doesn't have to be a right away rematch. It could be something down the line. But as of right now, I mean, these two guys are fairly young, I believe. I know Teofimo Lopez, I believe, was like 21 or 24, if I'm not mistaken. I'm sorry. So there's still a lot in front of them. And I think there's a lot of upcoming fighters like Shakur Stevenson that I would love to see get in the ring with one of these guys as well. So, very interesting finish to the fight this past weekend. Clark, we'll go back one more week. If you remember, we talked about the Crawford Porter fight, and I think me and you were both on Crawford, correct?
I believe so, yes.
Okay. Um, I think I told you, give me Crawford ninth round, give or take, and I was still off one. We got a knockout in the 11th round. Sean Porter has never been stopped in his whole fighting career. I think he's only been knocked down two times prior to this fight, and I think actually one of those fights he ended up still winning. This was not so much shocking, but it was shocking in the way it ended. The biggest thing that two things came out of this fight. One, we understood that Sean Porter's dad is no nonsense, and we also learned that Sean Porter has decided to hang it up. He also has his own podcast. He's on Fox when they have boxing matches. He does commentate as well. So, and I think he's 34, 35 years old. So, and he's fought everyone in this weight class. Everyone that is a big name fighter, with the exception of Manny Pacquiao, he has fought. He has beat some. He has lost some. He is a two-time champion with just four losses to his name against four of the best fighters in the last 5 years in that weight class. 5 to 10 years. I'll go back a little bit just to be safe. The very interesting thing, though, the other thing that was about this fight, the second part, is Terrence Crawford in a potential bout with Errol Spence Jr. I think this is the fight that we wanted to see. Crawford is now free from Bob Arum because of this fight. Bob Arum claimed that Crawford has actually lost him money. He has not made anything promoting Crawford, which is very hard for me to believe. But this will be one of those fights that I think George or Bob Arum will be pissed off about, because he will see how much money both of these two young men will make. And I'm interested in the fight because this may tell us who the best pound for pound fighter in the world is, with the exception of Canelo. Um, Clark, this is the aftermath of this fight. I think is more so interesting than the actual fight itself, because the outcome is what most expected. Moving forward, I don't know if you saw this last fight, but that is something a Spence Crawford fight. Is this something that you think will draw the attention of the casual fan?
More than likely. I know the sport has been growing a little bit, and I think that would be one of the fights that they might pull them. But we'll just have to kind of wait and see what kind of pull it might get.
True, true. I mean, I think this is going to be the biggest welterweight fight I would say since Floyd Pacquiao. Not saying the best, that's just the biggest. Because in terms of boxing, we know how important that is. It really fights in general, and that's why we see the cards lined up how they are with MMA and also the boxing world. But nonetheless, I believe with this, let's hope for something in 2022. The only kicker with Spence and Crawford not working out would be Ugis, who defeated Pacquiao when Spence was out with the injury. Who was originally slated to fight Pacquiao. So he would be the only kicker for me, and we may see Crawford or Spence fight him first before that bout. Not saying I wouldn't be a fan of it, but at the same time, it's really not what we came to see. So, but just want to throw that out there. We'll just kind of wait and see how this all pans out over the next year, or really few months, because it seems inevitable at this point.
Right, and we'll definitely keep an eye on it as well. Fights coming up there. I know being off a week kind of got a little bit behind, but we should be able to get caught back up fairly easily. Anything else before we move on to our last bit of news for this week?
No, sir. No, sir. What you got for us?
So, as official as of midnight last night, the MLB has the ownership has locked out the players. The CBA has officially ran out. They will have to get a new one and agree upon it and get it ratified. Obviously, before the season starts, pitchers and catchers were supposed to arrive February 16th, and then the season starting March 31st. But based on everything I've read online and basically what I've kind of come to grasp over the last several years between the ownership and the NFL or the MLBPA or Players Association is that this is going to be a while. This is going to take quite a bit because there is so much of a gap in between these talks. I think even last night when they tried to have some remnants of a talk, maybe before the CBA ran out, that lasted 7 minutes before they stopped talking to one another. It
Mm.
did not go well. Basically, the gist is for the casual fan that hasn't really delved into it, is basically the Players Association is trying to fight for the small market and mid-tier market teams and players. Basically, as of right now, you have to be at least 6 years into your MLB career to get off of your rookie contract before you can get a new one. That being said, it kind of really pushes some players and some markets to fall behind, at least in the Players Association's viewpoint. So what they're hoping is to shorten that time frame to allow them to go to free agency sooner. They're hoping to flood the free agency market with a bunch of players to allow all teams to have a much higher quantity of players to choose from for free agency, as well as help boost their salaries in the process. Unfortunately for the owners, they don't want any of that to happen. So that is kind of where we stand. Is basically one side wants one thing, the other side does not. So as for a time frame, I'm going to guess this is probably going to eat into a chunk of the season. I don't know how long into the season, maybe a quarter of the season, half the season. I don't know. I mean, we got a gist of this early in 2020, back when we had the pandemic. They couldn't figure things out and basically forced a 60 game season rather than trying to play as many games as possible. But keep in mind, just because the owners locked the players out, it's also putting the pressure on the owners because they're going to be losing out on ticket sales, any type of sales at this point. They're going to be losing out on, as well as the players losing out on paychecks as well. So there's pressure on both sides. The owners did this because they want to avoid a 1994 scenario where the players went on strike and they lost half the season and the World Series that year. So that's why they've locked the players out. They just kind of wanted to I guess basically stay in control of the conversation, but really at this point, I don't see these sides coming together really anytime soon. Fletch, what are your thoughts on this?
Uh, I would agree that I don't think they will make something happen as that soon. I don't know how long this may last. One thing I do know is that it probably will stifle that February date for the pitchers and catchers. Which will then, possibly push back spring training, and then it will be up to the league if they decide to start, sooner rather than later. Because I do think sometime in the spring we will get something happen. Something will happen. I don't think the owners or the players can afford you not playing this season. Not so much they can't afford, but I just don't see that happening. I do see a lockout. I do see a delayed season, a shortened season. I would not be surprised if we don't see baseball until June or July. But what I what I would be very surprised about is if we see no season or a very short season. Something that would not even start until maybe July, say not so much July, but August, September. That would be kind of crazy. I don't know if by then you just say, we're done this year, or do you, get whatever you can get out of a shortened season. I mean, there's already a ton of games already, so I'm sure you can get enough games in a shortened season as well. But that would be my, um, I don't know, first instinct about this whole situation would be that the season will be shortened. But I do think that they start about we'll say anywhere between 6 to 10 weeks late is what I would expect. We'll kind of see how that pans out, but I'm like you, man. I just don't see them coming to terms soon enough for guys to report the camp and then play opening day at the end of March. I do see an agreement happening sometime maybe late winter, early spring, but then that would delay camp, which would then delay the season. And again, I don't see it starting until probably at least June.
Yeah, that might be a conservative guess, but that's
Hmm.
kind of the hopeful guess, at least for the fans. We want to see actually a season. I know there's a lot of fans out there. I've brought this up to many of my family members as well as just my friends as well, and they keep on pushing the ideas like this is just billionaires fighting with millionaires.
Yep.
It's true, it is. I mean, these are professional athletes and the owners, they're very rich, most of them, not all of them. But this is what the Players Association is trying to fight for. They're trying to get more money in the hands of these smaller market teams as well as the smaller market or the players that just will never have the big name, they never have the big contracts. What they're pushing for is to allow them to get to free agency sooner. They're trying to get them to get in more service time. Basically, what that means is the more service time you have, the easiest description would be the reason Randy Rosarena won Rookie of the Year this year, even though he actually played the last quarter of last year, is because he didn't have enough service time to actually qualify to be a rookie. So he was able to play this year and then get enough service time in to actually count for his rookie season, even though it was like we're used to in the NFL, where your first season is your actual rookie season, regardless if you play or not. In the MLB, it's not that. You actually have to play games in order to count for your rookie season. Um, so that's what they
That's
mean.
interesting.
Yeah, so that's what I mean by service time. I mean, you can come in the MLB, and I mean that's why players that get drafted in the MLB draft right out of high school, some go straight to college, and they get drafted again. It's very weird, very complex, but at the end of the day, the Players Association are trying to fight for better salaries for these smaller market teams to give them a chance to try and fight, whereas the ownership basically wants everything to stay the same and just kind of sign the piece of paper and let's move forward kind of deal. Now, the one thing I saw out of an article on ESPN is that the Rob Manfred has not yet put any type of actual stop dates for an agreement to be made before consequences happen kind of deal. Um, but hopefully we won't get to that, but don't be surprised if we do get to that point
Cool.
because there is such a gap in between where the owners and the Players Association is right now. It's been quite a gap for quite some time, and just a little hint, just in case you're a sports fan and you're trying to yell and make fun of the MLB for this. check out the NFL after this season and tell me what happens then, because the CBA is set to expire as well. So, yeah, we'll see what happens there. But as for now, for the MLB, we'll continue to keep an eye on it. Obviously, this is just the very beginning of the lockout. The one funny note is since the lockout has happened, the MLB had to scrub their website. You can no longer see any player's actual photo or likeness on their website. Nor can they sell actually any type of memorabilia as well. So they're going to be losing out on that side. And of course, the players made sure that they were noticed. So they went to their social media pages and made sure that their images are just grayed out players to kind of mimic what the MLB is doing. Uh, so a little bit of a side note there, but again, we'll keep an eye just of how long this goes. Hopefully, uh, like you mentioned, sometime maybe in the early spring, but I hate to say it, but we might be looking at least half the season, a majority of the season, if not all the season, before these sides come together. Because just like in the article, Bruce Meyer is the player's chief lawyer, basically stated they don't. The MLB owners do not want to expand salary arbitration eligibility. They don't want to allow free agency to happen any sooner. They don't want to have the players to have any more service time abilities. Basically, everything the MLB Players Association wants, the owners do not. So something has to give. I just don't know when that's going to happen. Uh, but we will keep an eye on it moving forward. Let us go ahead now and jump into the college football playoffs. We are just mere days away from the actual final rankings to be released. That will actually happen this Sunday, so I'll be doing a video this excuse me, this Saturday as well. We'll be talking about that. As for those teams in the rankings, Georgia State at number one after winning their game. Michigan got a great win, move up to number two. Alabama survived to stay at number three, and Cincinnati will stay at four, with Oklahoma State sitting at number five and Notre Dame at number six. But before we get into this week's schedule, because it's championship week, which means a lot of really good games on tap for college football. There's a lot of movement around college football and college coaches in general have made some moves from place to place. Something that I guess the casual fan has a question about, simply because they don't quite understand why a coach would leave a team before the bowl game. Well, unfortunately, when it comes to college football, this week and next week are the two biggest weeks when it comes to recruiting. Uh, that is the reason why these college coaches, after the season ends, they start looking elsewhere to not only recruit, but if they're going to get hired elsewhere, they have to get hired quickly and they have to get on the recruiting trail, because otherwise they are going to get behind. Some of the bigger names that have left, obviously Lincoln Riley leaving Oklahoma. He will be going to USC. We also have Brian Kelly leaving Notre Dame, even though they actually have an outside chance of making the playoffs. He is moving on to LSU and some very major deals. Some other big names that could be on the move. Brent Venables, defensive coordinator out of Clemson, has been named as one of the three biggest names to potentially replace Lincoln Riley at Oklahoma. The other two names would be first-year head coach from South Carolina, Shane Beamer, as well as current head coach for Cincinnati, Luke Fickell. So there's a lot of names to be moved around. Fletch, we've talked about this a little bit off air. When it comes to Lincoln Riley, he kind of didn't really do himself any favors by saying that he's going to make USC the mecca of football on Twitter, and then quickly get replied to by one of his, well, ex-players at Oklahoma saying, "You just told us that here in Oklahoma last week." Uh, I that I It was hilarious. I laughed at that one. I just don't understand why you would do that. I understand you're going to tell that to everybody, but come on, you're going to get called out for it at this day and age. And then as for Brian Kelly, Basically, his defensive coordinator, Marcus Freeman, who is actually the next potential head coach at Notre Dame, according to one report saying that Marcus Freeman did not at all like the fact that Brian Kelly was going to leave that quickly. He only took 7 minutes to tell his players at Notre Dame that he was gone before moving to LSU. Fletch, my thought about it is I'm not a big fan of coaches leaving before the bowl games, before actually finishing the quote unquote season, is what we see it as. Uh, what is your thought about that?
Um, it's I don't know. It's I mean, to be honest with you, at this point, doesn't really surprise me much. Um, I personally do like the Brian Kelly move. Um, I just think he wants to be the best, and I just think he's every time he feels like he goes up against one of these, you know, top flight college football schools, they get punished, and I think he's tired of it. Um, I think he's done what he can do at Notre Dame. They win 10 plus games almost every single season. They've been to the playoff, I believe, twice, which is very hard to make with Clemson and Alabama hogging two spots literally every year, with the exception of this year. So I mean, I do like that move. I do not like how it happened. I do wish that this was something that, you know, was a little bit easier, but with the timing of it, you mentioned it too with the recruiting and everything. It's very hard to leave cleanly from one place to another in college football unless you are leaving to go pro and then like in Ohio State situation and an assistant coach comes in and just basically moves up. That is a clean leave. That's why you didn't see Ohio State lose any really between the two when Urban Meyer left and Ryan Day took over. I do think you see a lull in a lot of other teams though when a big coach leaves and then a new coach replaces them because what they're doing is literally bringing in not only a new coach but probably a mostly new coaching staff for that new help for that new coach. I don't like the Lincoln Riley move just because of how shady it felt. I think Ryan Kelly saw the opportunity arise, and I think LSU started to reach out to him, maybe vice versa. But I think that's something that was somewhat expected, at least internally, as things kind of were played out and then presented to us here in the public. With the Oklahoma situation, I feel like this was something that was sneaky, that was done sneaky, and I think that it's been something he's been plotting for quite some time. Um, that's one thing that because if you notice, a lot of recruits are flipping and they're going with him. I would not be surprised if you see a couple players transfer to try to go with him as well. I don't know if the transfer rules will do anything to stop that, but I do expect him to actually do well at USC. As bad as I don't like this move, I'm not rooting for him to be honest with you. But at the same time, I would not be surprised if he does do pretty well and at least bring them back to relevance where they're contending for the Pac-12 title every year.
Yeah, and to your mentioning, it's really a tale of two different type of mindset coaches. It's one that is looking to cement his name as one of the premier coaches in college football by actually going to the SEC, which has far been probably the best conference in college football for quite some time. Whereas Lincoln Riley had the opportunity to go to the SEC, to stay at
Mm-hmm.
Oklahoma. They were going to get there, and man, he bailed quickly going to USC. Now, granted, it could be his dream job. Maybe he grew up being a South Carolina or a Southern California fan. I definitely would choose Southern California as a destination place. I would. I'm taking that weather every day and all day.
Right.
Uh, but I will agree with you. The only saving point for Brian Kelly to me, I've never been a fan of how he leaves places. He left Cincinnati and left them high and dry. He's leaving Notre Dame the same way. Now, granted, Notre Dame is a totally different beast that it doesn't matter who the coach is. They're going to be able to recruit just because it's Notre Dame. They have the
Right.
brand name. It's always going to be there. But going to LSU, if he wins the national championship in his first year, the rest of his contract, all the years, is 100% guaranteed. It doesn't matter if he wins the national championship and leaves, he is going to get paid if he wins the very first year that he's there.
Wow.
So it's a pretty nice incentive to have. I don't think it's going to happen. Nick Saban's going to say something about that. They have a little bit of a history between those two. Uh, but yeah, it's going to take a few years to get the recruits in there that Brian Kelly wants. We'll see what he can do. Again, the brand of Notre Dame will always be bigger than just about any other college football team. Even LSU at this point, they've kind of struggled a little bit with the branding, but we will see what happens there. But of the two, I definitely would prefer the hiring of Brian Kelly going to LSU versus Lincoln Riley. We will keep another close eye on the rest of the coaches carousel because we're far from done at this point. There's going to be several other teams more than likely making some moves, but we will keep an eye on that. But we've got some games to watch. We've got championship weekend to watch. We have championship games galore at noon. Big 12 championship game. We have number 9 Baylor versus number 5 Oklahoma State. That's at noon at basically Cowboy Stadium at AT&T Stadium. Uh, I kind of like Oklahoma State to win against Baylor yet again, but if you want to see a little bit of chaos in the playoffs, you definitely want to be going to the side of Baylor and kind of see what happens. One other ranked game before we actually get to Saturday is going to be Friday evening. We've got the Pac-12 championship, Oregon versus Utah, a rematch of a game where Utah made sure that they were known as the better team that day. Uh, I doubt it happens like this again. I don't think Utah is going to blow them out of the stadium like they did last time. This is actually over at the Raiders' new stadium, Allegiant Stadium, otherwise known as the Roomba. Uh, they'll be playing there. And then we move on. We've got obviously the biggest game of them all, the SEC championship game. Number 1 Georgia versus number 3 Alabama in Atlanta. Again, if you want chaos to happen, you want Alabama to win. But if you want more chaos to win or happen, you want Georgia to win, actually. You want Georgia to lock in that number 1 seed, get Alabama that secondary loss, get them out of the way, and then potentially see like maybe a Cincinnati versus Houston in the AAC championship game. See how that plays out. Maybe a
Mhm.
Michigan versus Iowa in the Big Ten championship game. See how that plays out. I've been given some scenarios of what happens if Michigan, what happens if Cincinnati, what happens if Alabama all lose. Who would be your 4 teams in? Clearly,
Mhm.
Georgia would be in, but are we looking at Notre Dame filling one of those spots? Are we looking at Oklahoma State, assuming they win? What if they lose? Would Baylor instantly jump up to one of those 4 spots?
Oh, it's pure chaos.
Yeah, there is a lot to think about. Now, granted, one of the better games to watch at noon, if you're not paying attention to the Big 12, not a big fan of the Big 12, Kent State versus Northern Illinois for the MAC championship in Ford Field. You want to see a lot of scoring? Do you want to see offenses that just explode? Do you want to see a seat that's still worth $4 on or in order to buy a ticket? Your MAC championship is where you want to be. So we will keep an eye on that one as well. Fletch, any of these games presented to you today make you think, well, we might just see an upset today?
No, I don't actually. I am going all chalk this weekend, with the exception of Utah. That's the only one I see that's the lower seed that will win. Outside of, and Utah is actually favored, so I guess I am technically going chalk. Uh, I personally don't see these top teams losing. I would personally love to see Michigan uh, lose, Alabama lose, Cincinnati lose, and Oklahoma State lose, just to see what would happen. I would love to see what the committee pulls out of their sleeves and puts on our board on our TV when we watch this weekend. I would love to, I think Notre Dame would be guaranteed a spot if that were to happen, by the way. But I would be very interested to see what would happen. You would definitely have to include some type of a two-loss team. At this point, I would, yeah, just looking at it here, you would. Uh, yeah, man, I would love to see that happen, but realistically, I just don't see. 2 through 5 all losing. Um, I just don't see it. But at the same time, it's not impossible just for the simple fact with these matchups. So I mean, you got number 13 Iowa's only lost 2 games. Houston's ranked 21, but they've only lost 1 game. Georgia clearly is been the best team in college football this season. And then Baylor's ninth, and they've only lost 2 games. And then obviously the Pac-10, Pac-12 game is pretty contentious as well, with those two teams having the battle that they had, or the shellacking that they had earlier this year by Utah. Well, I would love to see Oregon rebound from that. But yeah, man, I'm excited for some football. Ultimately, as you can tell, I can tell you're excited as well. I do think that you'll see some high scoring games out the MAC. I think you'll see a high scoring game with the primetime ACC championship matchup, which doesn't include Clemson for the first time in which seems like a decade. So it's going to be an interesting weekend, Friday and Saturday, especially Saturday, of course. And I'm hoping for fireworks, but I if I had to bet money, I'm going chalk.
Yeah, it's tough to bet against some of these higher teams, like we saw against Michigan, how good they looked at home against Ohio State. It would be a real downer for them to go to Indianapolis and just put up a goose egg against Iowa, who at times this year looked like they had a phenomenal defense, and then other times they just didn't play defense. So we'll see what happens there. Obviously, Cincinnati has looked good of late as well. They'll be facing their second toughest test of the season against Houston. We'll see how that plays out. Uh, but I agree with you. I think Georgia clearly handles Alabama. I don't think that's much of a game. Maybe early on it is. If you want to go to the game, it's $359 is the ticket low. So that one's a little bit
Wow.
more of a pricey to go to the SEC championship game. The second highest one, according to ESPN, is the Big Ten championship game at $239. If is the lowest ticket still available there. But again, if you want to go to Detroit, if you want to pay $4 to get in, and I know you can, that MAC championship game is going to be a very high scoring game. I think the over under for the total yards, or maybe even total points in that game, might be somewhere in the 70s, maybe. Let me double check on that. I don't think they have it. Well, yeah, they do. 74 and a half is
Wow.
the
That's
over
big.
under. Yeah. So I'm gonna take the over. I think there's gonna be a lot of scoring there. I think we're gonna jump into the 90s is where I think it's gonna be. But once again, the college football playoffs, the final rankings will be introduced this coming Sunday for the final time. We will know who is in and who is out. I'll be making my guesses Saturday evening, doing rapid reaction on Sunday. And again, like we mentioned, if there's chaos, it's not going to make my job that much easier, nor will it make the committee's job that much
Not at all.
easier. But as a fan, we always love madness, especially March Madness. Why not introduce a little bit of madness into college football this year and see what happens? But on a little bit of a side note, unfortunately, the college football playoffs, the expansion was declined yet again. They could not agree upon it. So we still have to wait on that just a little bit more. They're still trying to iron out. I think it's a 12 team is what they're potentially expanding to, but nothing has been agreed upon as of yet. Uh,
Yeah. That's been in talks, man. I just think they're I think the reason why partially why it's not going to work, that's just too far. Going from 4 to 12, I could see 6 or 8, but I think that's what is holding this up. Is I think that the powers that be just don't see more than four really being a thing, and you trying to push them to 12 just doesn't make a lot of sense to them. Therefore, they're just further apart than necessary, in my opinion. Um, Clark, I had a question for you, actually, man.
yes.
With this weekend upcoming with these playoff games, there is one scenario that I've been playing out of my head a half a dozen times. Oklahoma State winning, Alabama losing. Um, or excuse me, Oklahoma State winning, I'm sorry, and Alabama winning. What happens in Cincinnati?
Cincinnati at that point, I really don't believe that Oklahoma State, even with a title to their name, because assuming Cincinnati wins the AAC, they're likely still going to be in. And then it comes down to what exactly happened in the SEC championship game? Is this a close game? Was this like a 6-9 battle, like defensive battle through and through? If that's the case, you're going to be looking at Alabama's going to be the number one team in the nation. Let's also I'm assuming Michigan wins in that scenario as well.
They do.
They'll be in. Georgia would fall to 3, and then Cincinnati, uh, I for me would stay at 4. I know Oklahoma State would add yet another ranked win, beating Baylor a second time. The, the the gap is closed. I guess it will come down to this: two things. Number one, obviously, like I mentioned, the SEC championship game. What kind of game is it? Close game, blowout. What are we talking about here?
Hmm.
Number two, what happens in the AAC championship game? Did Cincinnati win close? Do they not yet put up another monster game like they did against was it SMU they did that too? Or
Yeah.
yeah, where they destroyed SMU. If they go out and destroy Houston, I can't see a scenario that puts Oklahoma State above Baylor. Unless the only way I see that is, let's say Cincinnati wins by 3 scores. They look really impressive.
Hmm.
I don't think there's a scenario that that happens. Now, if they win close, they only win by 10 points or less. I honestly think that Oklahoma State would have to go out against Baylor and dominate the way that Ohio State did against Wisconsin back in 2014. If they go out there and just boat race them, I could see a scenario where the committee puts Oklahoma State above Cincinnati. I think
Okay.
that's what it would have to take is Oklahoma State just looking so dominant, so amazing, because they barely beat Oklahoma, which is still a ranked team, but we know Oklahoma's not as good as the ranking shows. Uh,
Right.
and it's tough, but I think that's what it would have to take in order to jump an undefeated team at that point, unless, and it wouldn't shock me, if the committee goes out there and starts to put values on uh, variables that they had not yet put variables on or values on, like heavily weighting a conference tournament or heavily weighting a fact that they're a non-power 5 school or something along those lines.
Right.
Don't see that happening. But to your point and to what you're trying to get me to say is if Cincinnati makes it close, Oklahoma State dominates, yeah, I could easily see a scenario where Cincinnati gets left out.
Cincinnati needs style points this weekend, essentially.
Yeah, they're going to need the style points. No matter what they do, unfortunately, like I said, they're being a non-power 5 school. Unfortunately, there are people in that room. Of the 13 people, there are several of them that just do not value a power 5 school, which is totally unfair. It's not Cincinnati's fault. They're playing who they were scheduled to play 5 to 10 years in advance. They're doing everything they need to do. But being a non Power 5 school, those people in that room, the only way to make them unable to have an actual conversation about moving them out is if you dominate. If you go out there and you're undefeated and you dominate against Houston, the other people in that room are going to have a louder voice than they do. So that's really where it has to be for Cincinnati. They need the style points. And for Oklahoma State, they need it as well. I mean, being at number 5, granted, they got to hope for something to happen. Obviously, if Alabama loses, it's going to open up a door, and Oklahoma State should slide into number 4 pretty easily. But it wouldn't hurt to go out there and take care of Baylor in a very fantastic fashion, because uh, if there is any of that discussion about a one-loss Georgia or an undefeated Cincinnati, something like that, it doesn't hurt to have the style points and say, you know what, but this team over here, they just dominated. They're
Right.
they're
Right.
they're pointing the arrow in the right direction. And that's exactly what
That's
Ohio State did in 2014 that they truly needed in order to be put above. I think that was the year they put them above Penn State, a team that they lost to.
They did. Yeah, just Penn State not being able to play in that title game, and then Ohio State wearing out Wisconsin the way they did. It honestly was undeniable, and obviously we're glad it happened because that was actually the champion too. So That's just a case in point why another a big even more of a reason why both of those teams really need as many style points as possible. I think they know that. I know the coaches come out and for Cincinnati has specifically said we play to win football games. We don't play for to impress the committee. Um, the other thing that I know you mentioned too, there's people in that room, man, that are just going to be, hey, they're Cincinnati. They're not playing, Power Five conference football every week. Lee Corso actually being one of them. I don't know if you heard him on Saturday. He said that the group of five conferences need their own playoff. So he's saying that they essentially just don't belong at all. And we see great college football from a lot of these group of five schools, man. And we know a lot of them. If you put them in, say, for instance, right now, you put Cincinnati in the ACC or the Pac-12, I still think they are undefeated, if not 11-1. I think they're just as good as advertised. So, um, it's going to be very interesting this weekend. That's just a scenario that I think would really, you know, shake up a lot of things. If Bama wins, what do you do with Michigan, Cincinnati, and then your Big 12 winner, and then possibly a Notre Dame? What do you do with these teams? I think Notre Dame needs more help than these other ones, but I wouldn't be surprised if Baylor has a crap ton of style points and they jump all the way to fourth if you get enough to lose, say Michigan and Cincinnati both lose and Alabama loses. Then what do you do? So especially with as much as the conference titles are weighted. So it is a wait and see. We'll see what happens. I'm excited. It's great time of year for college football as it always is, and as we go into another playoff run, bowl season, and everything, it's chaos yet again. So more so than I think has ever happened before.
Absolutely. We don't have the disparaging of two teams that are just dominating their way and locking in two of those four spots, like you mentioned, of Alabama and Clemson. This year it's been Georgia, and very likely they're going to handle their business against Alabama. At least all signs are pointing that way, but it is Nick Saban. You never count Nick Saban out.
Never.
But at this point, it will make a great game that I'll definitely be keeping an eye on, along with all the others, including my Mac Daddy of them all, the Mac Championship. Seeing if I hit the over on that one. But let's go ahead and jump into our final here. Let us talk about our pick six for the week. Last week, Fletch, congratulations. You led all scores with 4 out of 6 correct. Congratulations.
Thank you. Thank you.
I had 3 myself, so you gained a spot on me. You're still down 4 for the season, but there's still several weeks yet to go. And like I told you, my downtrodden picks at the towards the end of the year are coming. So there are going to be some 1 or 2 weeks. I have a feeling. It always happens. I can never tell these last games of the year if players are actually going to try, if they're going to play their actual starters. But again, you picked 6 great games for us. Let's go ahead and get started. The very first one, we have Denver on the road against Kansas City. Kansas City coming off of a bye. Denver, I don't remember who they played last week. You may have to refresh my memory on that one.
Yeah, yeah, no problem. We got you. They beat the Chargers last week, 28-13.
There we go. I knew you were a Broncos fan. You would
I
remember,
got you covered.
especially if they lost or won, either way.
True.
Uh, Going against Kansas City off of a bye. As much as I would like to pick Denver, especially as good as the run game looked, especially when Melvin Gordon was out of that game just a little bit of time with that hip pointer, uh, I've got Kansas City winning this one. I don't. I just think off of a bye, Pat Mahomes and company is coming out red hot to finish off the year. Fletch, who do you got?
Yeah, man, I'm right there with you, actually. I love my Broncos, and we are playing some pretty good football as of the last few weeks, with the exception of the Eagles' loss. Um, However, I just think Kansas City on a bye, at home, off a bye week, divisional opponent that they've, handled the last few years, and you had another week to prepare for them. Um, I think Kansas City comes out on Sunday night. They play very well. I do think you get a good Bronco performance, but I just think Kansas City will have a little bit too much for Denver, and I got KC on this one as well.
Nicely done. Let's move on to game number 2. We've got the Buccaneers versus the Atlanta Falcons. The Buccaneers. It was the Leonard Fournette show last week. I should know. My fantasy team was thank you, thank you. mode
Mm.
for that 4 touchdown performance. They'll be facing off against Atlanta, who continues to be without Calvin Ridley. I thought there was conversation about him potentially coming back, but it doesn't seem like. I doubt he comes back the rest of this season, but who knows at this point? I don't think he is enough to really turn this team around, nor do I think they're going to win this game. I've got Tampa Bay going on the road, getting the win. Fletch, who do you got?
Yeah, to my sadness, I don't think Calvin Ridley's coming back either. I have him on my fantasy football team in our league here, so I'm not really liking that at all too much. Nonetheless, I am going to go with the Bucks on this one. I just think that this time of year is really when you see a Brady-led team, do what they need to do. They've had some issues, couple losses here to the Saints and the Washington football team, and they rebounded and had a great game against the Giants. Not saying that they're really that good, but and then you come out and beat the Colts team, who was really actually playing really good football, and they beat them in a 7 point game. I just think they're playing good football now. I do think that this is a divisional game, and I think that Brady and company, I should say, is really gonna come out on firing on all cylinders. The defense will play well. I think they'll stifle the run game as usual, and they win this game fairly easily.
Yeah, I agree, and I don't think Atlanta, as well as Cordero Patterson, has exploded on this season. I don't think that offense is just gonna score enough to keep pace with the Buccaneers, especially with their tough defense that they have. Let us move on to game number three, maybe one of the higher scoring games of the year. It is the Chargers versus the Bengals. Even though the Chargers like to run the ball and actually have a high flying offense, the Bengals is one of the more slower offenses in the league. But my goodness, is Joe Mixon on fire? That run game is running on all cylinders, as I should say. They are just destroying people, whereas the Chargers still a very good offense, but their defense is more of a funnel run defense. They allow the run to happen, they protect against the pass, and I see a hot Joe Mixon winning this one at home. I got the Bengals, maybe in a big one, maybe in a high scoring affair. Fletch, who do you got?
I think it's gonna be high scoring too, man. I'm excited for the Herbert Burrow matchup. These guys were in the same draft class, if I'm not mistaken. So that this is one of those that I hope to see this matchup on the schedule for years to come. To be honest with you, just the way these two careers have been going so far, and the way these two teams have performed this year. I mean, you would just assume that at least both of these teams will at least be offensively relevant, is what I'm going to call it. They may have some bad seasons due to no defense, but I don't think you're going to get bad quarterback play out of these two guys. So, um, to come back to this game here, I got the Bengals also. I really like them at home. Um, this is always a tricky game, I think, for the West Coast teams because it's actually 10 o'clock their local time, and it's 1 o'clock out here on the East Coast. So very early game for them, and then just to put on top of that too, just I'm gonna just piggyback off what you said, man. The run game has been lights out. Not saying that Eckler's not any less of a running back than Mixon, but Mixon's been on a freaking tear lately. So I think with the support of the running game, you got Chase, Higgins, Boyd. I just I see a lot of points, and I see the Bengals pulling it off.
Agreed. I like the pick as well. Let's move on to game number four. We have the Ravens on the road against the Steelers. Steelers really just kind of trying to survive, a team that really has struggled of late. Ben Roethlisberger is well past his prime at this point. I would say mere games left in his career at this point. Should be at the end of the year is when he should retire based on what we have seen on the field. As for the Ravens, Lamar Jackson continues to look pretty good. The passing game was not great this past week, but this is one of those divisional matchups. This is where I think they get back to the nitty gritty, hard defense. I don't think Pittsburgh's defense is fully healthy at this point.
No.
Uh, so unfortunately, at this point, I've got to go with the road team. I'm gonna go with the Ravens to win this one. Fletch, who do you got?
Yes, sir. Man, you hit it right on the head with Big Ben. It's over. It's over. I just we got to throw that out there, man. He's got to hang it up after this season. He's a mere shell of himself. That is all he is out there. Great career, but I think it's a wrap. Nonetheless, I do have the Ravens as well. I just don't see them losing this game. I don't think it'd be high scoring. The Ravens have struggled to score, like you mentioned, the last 2 weeks, and I think they do continue to struggle to score until they right the ship. The good thing about this game is that they are facing an extremely familiar opponent. And I think that can actually help you right the ship. You know what they're going to do. And you know how to game plan around it. It's just, are you going to be able to execute is the biggest thing. And that's the biggest things with these games are who's going to execute, especially with these AFC North games. So I got the Ravens in this one. I just think they execute much more. I do think the Steelers put up a hell of a fight. But I got the Ravens in this one as well.
Yeah, especially coming off of a four interception performance of Lamar Jackson, I would imagine they're going to get back to what he does best, and that is run the football. So, might be one of the more low scoring games of the week, but uh, we will keep an eye on that. Moving on to our fifth game, an NFC West matchup. The San Francisco 49ers on the road facing the Seattle Seahawks. 49ers playing well of late. They're actually getting a little bit healthier, playing a little bit better on the defensive side of the football. They did lose Debo Samuel to a couple weeks with a groin injury, but he should be back in time for the stretch run. As for Seattle, not looking great. I think Russell Wilson. I think it was said on another podcast I was listening to that really the time frame for Russell Wilson's injury to come back from was this week. So it sounds like he came back 2 weeks too early, and guess what? His play showed it. He looked terrible the last 2 weeks. And DK Metcalf has had the worst 3 game stretch of his young career. Uh, I don't see the Seahawks winning this one. I know this is going to be a very close matchup just because they always play each other close, but I just don't think Russell Wilson is quite right, and I don't know if he's gonna show it to be honest this week. I've got San Francisco winning, which means they'll lose, but I'll pick San Francisco to win. Fletch, who do you got?
I'm tired of picking the Seahawks. I'm just not going to pick them this week, Clark. I that's my reasoning. They just been terrible defensively. How many defense they played actually well defensively last week, but they were on the field for like 80 plays. You can't win a football that way. You're constantly three and out, three and out, three and out every time. Like you're not gonna win games. You're not gonna be in games. It was surprising they were even in the game against Washington this past week. I just don't see them winning. The Niners have played good football. They've beaten the Rams by 21. They beat the Jaguars by 20, and the Vikings, who play everyone close, they beat them by 8. And honestly, Clark, moving forward, if the Seahawks, excuse me, if the Niners win this game, I can honestly see them making the playoffs. They'll be at 7-5, and they have some tough games on their schedule, but they also have some, middling games on their schedule. I mean, after you got the Seahawks this week, you got the Bengals to be their toughest opponent, really until they see the Rams at the end of the season, because they got Falcons, Titans, Texans, and Titans have not looked near themselves the last couple of weeks either. So I would not be shocked if the Niners can pull off what is that 1, 2, 3, 4 more wins and be 10-7 come the end of the season and get one of these wild card spots. So I know it's probably good news for you if it does happen, but I just they're playing really good football lately, and I think the schedule is helping them a little bit with the Jags being in there as well, and then like I mentioned, the Falcons and Texans coming up. So nonetheless, we'll wait and see, but I do have the Niners winning this game, and I don't want to just say because I'm tired of picking Seattle. The Niners are actually playing good football, and Seattle is just not.
True, and as of right now, the Niners are the sixth seed heading into the playoffs
There
if
you go.
we were ending it today. As for a final game, probably the game of the year, we have the Patriots, the AFC East leading Patriots, going against the Buffalo Bills in Buffalo. This game is huge, implications galore, not just for
Massive.
the AFC East, but just for the AFC, just seeding in general. Right now, Patriots are the 2 seed, and the Bills are the sixth seed. So we could see a little bit of a swap between those seeds, at least at this point. Patriots have played great. They're not going to just blow your blow your mind by just destroying people. They play very smart. This is Bill Belichick. There's been a lot of analysts that have looked at Bill Belichick this year and said this is probably the best season he's ever coached because he's had to. He doesn't have the Tom Brady to rely on to allow him to kind of take games over when need be. He's got Mac Jones, who is playing very well for a rookie. Defensively, they're playing well. As for Buffalo, they've played a little bit better of late. Obviously, Josh Allen has kind of had ups and downs. Basically, the whole team has had ups and downs. But that's what happens when you don't have much of a run game to speak of. They're trying to force it in there, but it's not quite there yet. But this game in Buffalo, I don't know what the weather is going to be like, but it kind of sounds like it's going to be cold already. Uh, this could be a lot of tables are going to be destroyed. We already know that. Uh, this one is probably the toughest one to pick. So far, you and I have picked the exact same teams for every single game. This one's tough. Fletch, let's hear yours first.
Fair enough. So, a few things I do want to mention, and it's kind of funny that I'm going to mention this, and then you'll hear my pick. Um, the Pats actually, I know you mentioned they don't really blow you away. Clark, I was thinking the same thing until I just pulled up their schedule. Man, I will say their winning streak consists of a win 54 to 13, 24 to 6, 45 to 7, 25 to 0, and 36 to 13. I think, granted, these opponents are in that same order: Jets, the Panthers, the Browns, and the Falcons and the Titans.
Yeah, that's what I thought.
So I get your point as far as not really blowing, because all these teams, as they have played them, have clearly been. Some of these teams are good teams, but they're not playing well right now. Like the Titans and the Browns, they're just not playing well right now.
Right.
Nonetheless, definitely get where you're coming from. I do believe the Pats are one of the better teams in football. After this week, I still will believe they are one of the better teams in football. But I think Buffalo actually gets this one done. Reason being is that one, they again, this is a very familiar matchup. That's the first thing. So both of these teams know each other, which is going to be honestly good for Buffalo because they'll need that more in their pocket than New England does, because New England doesn't need that with Belichick at the helm. I also do believe Belichick is the coach of the year this year, by the way. I do agree with that. I heard you mention that as well. The one thing about this game, though, it's in Buffalo. So they are going to have the home crowd behind them. It's a primetime game, so you know it's going to be live. It's going to be very, very hype. Very, very hype. So just expect a lot of that. But I do expect the Bills to come out, and I think they execute. I think that's the biggest thing with the Bills is when they execute what they're trying to do, they can actually win. I do think that it's going to be a tough game. I do personally think it's going to be low scoring, which I'm not going to be too happy about because I do need Stephon Diggs to do his thing here for my fantasy team. But I just have a feeling it's going to be a low scoring, rough game with two teams that have two good defenses. They're both very well rounded, with the exception of the Bills' running games. Essentially, even if you look at the standings, and this is why this game is just it's a lot on this game too. Now, you already mentioned the playoffs, the playoff standings. The other thing too is if you look at points for and points against, they're almost identical. 336 points for New England, 326 for Buffalo. Points against, 190 for New England, 182 for Buffalo. They both have the highest point differential in the entire league by far. This is going to be a hell of a game. I'm excited to see it. Good things come to an end, which is also the reason for me picking Buffalo. It's hard to sustain a long winning streak like this in the NFL, and there will be bumps along the road. Do I think the Pats will avenge this loss at the end of the season? I personally think they do, barring everyone stays healthy. But right now in Buffalo, primetime game, a lot on the line. I get it's Belichick in New England, but Buffalo's a damn good team as well, and they got a lot of talent over there on both sides of the ball. I just think it's an equally matched game, and I got Buffalo winning this one at home in a low scoring one.
I like the pick, but I gotta go with the Patriots. There's one point, one not even a statistic, just bit of news that I just remembered that will give New England the edge, even though it's in Buffalo, even though it's a primetime game. All your points super valid. Tre'Davious White being out of this game
Mm.
is huge. And Bill Belichick, we all know what he does. He takes your best player and removes them from the game. So unfortunately for Stephon Diggs, he may have some struggle bussing going on this week. But I like New England going to Buffalo, get the win. Going to be a very close game, one of the better games to watch. And if you like football, this is going to be the game to watch this weekend. Um,
Facts.
so I like New England. Those are our pick six for the week. Fletch, again, you are only a mere 4 points down, and this week you have a chance to catch up on one of them because we picked the correct, or we picked accurately, I guess you could say, or the same the rest of the way through. If you'd like to join us, just simply put your guesses in the comments and we will add you to the big board as well. Let's go ahead and finish this off with our top 10 of the week. Um, for this week, I had to do it a little bit quickly. Obviously, it was pretty quick right before we actually started. Had to kind of remember what these teams did this past week because, again, the tryptophan from all that turkey is still getting at me. But I do have a top 10. I will rattle off my 10, 9, and 8 real quick. At number 10, a newbie coming in at number 10 for me is the Bengals at number 10. Joe Burrow and company looking very good, especially the run game. We mentioned it before. They look really, really good. And whenever a team has a really good run game and plays very strongly on the defensive side of the football, they're going to beat a lot of teams. So I like the Bengals sitting at number 10. You could even argue if they wanted to move up a spot before. But at number 9, I have the Patriots sitting at number 9. They are a newcomer to my top 10 as well. Been playing some great football and will probably get, at least based on my pick, a premier win this weekend. And then as for number 8, a team that has all the pieces there, they just got to get healthy, and they might see that happen tonight. Is the Cowboys sitting at number 8? They have fallen just a little bit there. They need to get Amari Cooper back. We see what happens when Amari Cooper is not there. We see a bad team, a bad offense. Zeke's not fully healthy. Cooper is playing tonight, but he's not fully healthy either. Probably still dealing with a few COVID issues. But for my 10, 9, and 8, I have the Bengals, the Patriots, and the Cowboys. Fletch, tell the people your 10, 9, and 8.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. My 10 is the Cincinnati Bengals. Mirrors yours as well. I really like this team. They've been playing very well. Won their last two games. Um, Offense is looking, lights out right now. They had played some, pretty good defenses too, and put 32 on the Raiders and 41 on the Steelers, and I expect them to put up at least 30 here against the Chargers as well. So I really like the way they've been playing. They've been knocking on the door of this top 10 for a little while, and then they kind of stifled when they lost to the Jets, and then got smacked around by Cleveland. So kind of put a hurting on them breaking into our top tens. But I'm glad to see them both here. We both have them here at 10. My number 9 team is actually a team that I've been really high on all year, and they just been disappointing since the our last airing. Actually, it's the Tennessee Titans here at number 9. Have them slipping quite a bit here, just with those two losses that they had. If I'm not mistaken, 2 weeks prior, I did have them second actually, and just kind of slowly felt their way down here to 9. So, two losses will do that to you, especially two losses really not being, teams they should have lost to based on the teams that they've beaten this year. So got them sliding down here at 9, and then kind of sad to say it, man. My Super Bowl pick this year, the Rams. They just don't look good. They actually had the same record last year with Jared Goff as they do here with Matt Stafford. Robert Woods, unfortunately, is out for the season. And you got to work Odell in. I know Van Jefferson has been filling in pretty well, but nothing too crazy, man. It's just they gotta figure things out over there. I think Henderson is a little banged up as well. But I just expect this team to get back on the horse, man, and try to figure it out here soon, especially as we make this playoff push. And then also too, you got these the Cardinals still here knocking at the door, and then you got the Niners playing good football. So they gotta right the ship here, man. I got them slipped here down at 8. Those are my 8, 9, and 10.
That's crazy to have your Super Bowl champ fall all the way down to 8. But when you see the rest of his list as well as the rest of my list, again, it will continue to reflect what we've been doing or what we've been seeing in the NFL the last several weeks is just all these teams. There's not really any team that's just taken off.
Right.
There's no team that's really going to be the true number one or number two, and then everybody else. It's just there's a lot of teams that should be up there, just like these Rams, but haven't quite. They've been in a funk of late, but the talent is still there, and that's the most important part. As long as the talent is still there, they still got my little Cooper Cup, and they're going to be doing some things. Let me
Very
go
true.
for go ahead and I'm going to do my 7 and 6 at number 7. I have the Ravens sitting here. I wanted to put them higher. I actually had them higher at one point, but when they looked as bad as they did, passing wise, it gives me concerns. You can't have a team that A has had so many ravenous, no other better term for it, injuries at the running back position than the Ravens have all season long. Even in the preseason, they had injuries. They are on whatever number running back you want to find. They've got Devonta Freeman leading the way at this point. That tells you everything you need to know, uh, which means you would think that their passing game would have a little bit more time to be a little bit better, get a little bit stronger. Man, it has been rough. I mean, early on it was good, but they have not been looking very good in the passing game of late. Obviously, we mentioned it earlier with Lamar Jackson throwing 4 interceptions in the last game. They got to figure some things out. They're still leading that division, but the Bengals are right there. They are getting better and better. And again, that run game with the Bengals looks so good right now. But I have the Ravens sitting at number 7. And then at number 6 is where I have your number 9, the Titans, sitting at number 6. Again, I could easily put them further down. I could move them up a little bit. I still think that they can play well. They have been hit with the injury bug of late, losing Derrick Henry earlier this year. Uh, their top two receivers, A.J. Brown and Julio Jones, have gone down. Uh, Defensively, they have struggled at times, but most of the pieces are there. They just got to get healthy, and they might get back to showing what they can do. I really believe in what Mike Vrabel does. He's a great coach in this league. But I have the Titans sitting at number 6 for now. Fletch, I've seen your list. Inform the people, and maybe you might need a strong explanation for number 6, but tell them who number 7 and number 6 are for him.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Number 7, I have the Buffalo Bills. Still high. I still think of them very highly. I think they still are a really good football team. They've won every other game, I think, for the last month and a half, uh, if I'm not mistaken. So, I mean, the Bills. I mean, they. I think they'll right the ship. It's weird, man. I mean, they got these blowout wins on here, and then they have these terrible losses and blowouts on here as well. It's just a very weird season that they've been having, and I think, like you mentioned earlier, is partially due to not really having any type of running game right now. So we'll see how this team does shake out towards the end of the season because they do have a somewhat of a they have some tough opponents coming up, and then they do finish the season fairly easily. So I'm expecting them to kind of stay around this middle tier group here, probably anywhere between 3 through 8 for the time being. But right now, I do have them at 6. So Clark, you said I owe the people an explanation for my number, or excuse me, that was 7. I owe the people an explanation for my number 16.
I mean, I understand the kind of the mindset, but at 6?
Yes, sir. I have the Kansas City Chiefs back in the
Wow.
fold here at number 6. And I'm gonna tell you why I'm not so far fetched on this one. Kansas City Chiefs currently are top of the AFC West at 7-4. The Kansas City Chiefs have also won the last 4 games. In those last 4 games, they have beaten the Packers, which I know did not have Aaron Rodgers. They destroyed the Raiders, who I know have not been playing good football as of late. And then, of course, they beat the Cowboys, who I know have also been struggling. However, I got to give credit where it's due. The type of offense that we know they have, Edwards-Helaire is back, which is honestly we can kind of see it's definitely having him helps. And granted, there's a little bit of conversation on if he's going to be the guy in Kansas City moving forward. However, as of right now, he is their best option. Um, they're starting to piece things together and look a little bit better. The correlation that I've seen over the last few weeks has really been defense. With the exception of getting smacked around by the Titans, they've actually held teams to 17 or less. Granted, some of these teams are struggling. However, scoring only allowing teams to score twice in the 17 3 times, one of those being a field goal clearly. that's, teams typically can score 20 points a game. Like bad teams can typically still score 20 points a game on any given night, and it just hasn't happened against Kansas City. The last time they've given up more than 20 is week 4. Now, they're not known for their defense, but their defense is doing enough to make the game winnable, where the offense is now starting to click a little bit as well. So I think partially the reasons for my putting them here at 6 and leaving out a team that some people would probably think I'm crazy to leave out, and the Cowboys in my entire top 10 right now. Essentially, they've just been playing pretty damn good football lately, and we know the talent is there, and we know what the ceiling is. And I can't leave them out of my top 10 any longer with them winning this many games in a row.
Understood. I think the Chiefs for me would be my number 11 or 12 team. I think they have definitely earned the chance to get on the cusp, but I would like to see uh, just another really good game out of them. I think I would consider them as one of my top 10 teams because we all know that one of these teams is going to get an L this week and probably fall out. So I just had to have you do a little bit of further explanation because the
Of
Chiefs were
course.
just out of nowhere and then jump up to number 6 for you. But hey, that's what happens when you have a sponsorship with Heinz Ketchup. That'll do it for you every day of the week. Um, as for my teams, I will rattle off my 5, 4, and 3. At 5, I have the Rams. This is where I have your Rams sitting here. Again, the pieces are there. They
Cool.
haven't been playing great football, but the pieces are still there. And as long as the pieces are still there, they haven't been really dealing with a ton of injuries. I know Daryl Henderson has a little bit of an injury, didn't practice again today, but I still think they are one of the favorites in the NFC to come out as the representative in the Super Bowl. At number 4, I had the Buffalo Bills sitting here, and this could change quite quickly depending on what happens against Bill Belichick this week. Uh, Again, they haven't been playing the greatest football, but they're still a very good team. Hopefully, they can weather this storm a little bit, continue to play well. Josh Allen getting back to being the Josh Allen that we remember, but unfortunately, the run game isn't there. It's non existent. So they got to get the passing game going. And for your sake, for fantasy football, I would like to see Stephon Diggs do well also, because I also have him in my fantasy football team. So we'll keep an eye on them. And then for my number 3, I have the Buccaneers sitting there. They kind of moved back a little bit, moved up a little bit. They were number 6 for me last week. So move up 3 spots from last week. They got a great win against Indy. That was one of the better teams that had been playing great football of late against the Colts, holding Jonathan Taylor to uh, mere mortal numbers thus allowing Fournette to take his place this past week. But I like the Bucks at number 3. Fletch, who is your 5, 4, and 3?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. I like the picks. I do like the picks. Number 5, I have the Baltimore Ravens. They're still a really good team, and I think, like you mentioned, with them is that they just haven't been having a lot of good, passing games as of late. They've been struggling on offense. I think they've kind of been around this range for me all season. They kind of just move up or down depending on who's slumping, who's not. Right now, just with the Titans and the Rams slumping, that's part of the reason why I do have them up here at number 5. And I mean, we'll see what happens. I mean, Lamar Jackson tends to do enough for you to win most games, and he can win a lot of games for you. But the issues at running back have really hurt them, and I think that's part of the reason why you don't see why you've seen lately just them kind of struggling is they don't have the strongest running game anymore to rely on to kind of open up that pass. So I do have them here at 5. I do think that's kind of where they'll fall pretty much all season is kind of this middle tier here, kind of like I mentioned with the Bills. Playoff contender, possible Super Bowl run is what I like to kind of call this tier. So we'll see how the rest of the season shakes out for the Baltimore Ravens here. Moving forward, my number 4 team, I think this is also a little bit of a surprise as well, is the New England Patriots. They've been playing lights out the last 6 weeks. We've kind of talked about the wins that they've had. We understand the teams that they've played, but I also understand in the case we talked about or in college football with even like a Georgia, or with the schedule that we mentioned, I think the Titans have coming up at the end of the season. It's kind of, or excuse me, the Bills have at the end of the season that may help them out. You just got to beat who's in front of you. And that's essentially what they've been doing. But they've been playing great defense. Mac Jones is playing mistake-free football, and it's looking like the favorite to win Rookie of the Year at this point, at least on the offensive side of the ball. And they have a running game. You got Damian Harris, you got Ramondre Stevenson, you got Bolden, Robert. I think his first name is Robert. I can't remember right now.
Brandon.
Brandon, sorry, Brandon. Brandon Bolden. You got pieces, man. You got a plethora of like solid receivers with Bourne and Myers, and I know I'm leaving another guy out here, and it's very they're very well rounded, man. They just don't make mistakes. They're extremely well coached, obviously, and they just look like a really well seasoned football team. It gives me 0-1 vibes, man. I'm not even going to lie to you. Um, I understand that was a Drew Bledsoe team until Brady took over, but this is kind of the time in the season where New England put it together that time of year. If you go back and look at those game logs, so it's really weird seeing this, and it's not a Brady led Pat team, but they're on number 4 right now, and they're really hot. So I'm really excited. We talked about this matchup on Monday. So nonetheless, that's my 4. And number 3, I have the same as you as well. I have the Buccaneers. I do think they're right in the ship. This is the time of year we talked about earlier in the show card where Brady kind of puts things together on the offensive side of the ball. We know defensively they're going to be stout. They're going to come up. They're going to come to play in these big games coming up too, as they have done all season and deep in the playoff run last year. So we'll continue to see how that progresses. But I do have them here at 3.
All right, and go ahead and tell the people who is your 2 and number 1 for this week.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. I kind of feel a little silly, man, not really having these guys like consistent top 3 pretty much all season. And that's number 2 is the Cards, and number 1 is the Packers. So, I mean, these two teams have, so far, at least what we've seen, when healthy, been pretty much the best teams in football. The Cardinals have held it together without essentially what you can say is their 2 best players in Kyler Murray and DeAndre Hopkins. And the Packers, they're sitting pretty right now with the best record in the league. Um, here going into week 13. So these are my top 2. It's very hard to separate the 2, but I do think these are probably the 2 best teams in football. I would love to see these 2 teams meet in the playoffs. We saw a matchup once already, but I think a playoff matchup would mean that much more to us. Obviously, the Bucks have something to say about it, but these 2 teams, man, they're clicking right now. They're playing very well. They have a couple losses, but nothing more than necessary, I guess you could say at this point. Just obviously due to their records here. So that's my 1 and 2, Clark. I don't think I've heard you mention these 2 teams. So I would assume they are the same. I'm just curious about the order. Tell the people what you got.
Yes, they are the same 2 teams, but I have them flip-flopped. I have the Cardinals at number 1 and the Packers at number 2. And honestly, record-wise, the Cardinals have a half-game lead on the Packers at this point. I think that might
True.
have been the real deciding factor there. It could have been Aaron Rodgers' broken toe. It might have been. Who knows? Um, it's a slightly worse injury to come back from as he continues to play through it without no problems. Uh, but I like the Cardinals. They continue to play well even without Kyler Murray playing at his best and really playing. He's been struggling with some health. I think he's supposed to be playing this week. Nothing guaranteed, but I think he is expected to play this week. But like you said, both of these teams very good. I really like the Packers pass game. We always have. As long as Aaron Rodgers and Devontae Adams are both healthy, they always have a chance. As for the Cardinals, I think they're a little bit more of a more rounded, better team overall, but it is going to come down to Kyler Murray and what he can do. It always comes down to the quarterback position. If he can't get it done, so go the Cardinals, at least at this point. But to their credit, getting James Conner to come in, and he is leading the league in rushing touchdowns with 12. What a great find for them to have at this point. So those are our top 10 teams for the NFL this week. Obviously, we have some games. We have the games right now. We have the Cowboys versus the Saints tonight. It's currently tied at 0 still. with about 4 minutes left in the first quarter. Fletch, before we shut up shop, is there anything else you want to tell the people?
No, man. Just stay tuned. We'll be back next week. Watch these games. We got championship weekend in college football. We got a little bit more conference play starting up in in college basketball. Like I mentioned, the NBA, we're a quarter of the way through, which is really when you start to see teams pick up a little bit more. You don't see that playoff ball like we all like to see until maybe the last 2, 3 weeks of the season. But right now is where you start to see, some teams really kind of put the foot on the gas a little bit more, and we'll kind of wait to see what happens, man, with this whole college football, or I'm sorry, this whole baseball lockout scenario here, man. It's something to follow, something I think we'll keep our eyes on, and mention until we kind of figure out a resolution, or at least tell you if there's news or not. So that's one thing that's really piquing my interest right now.
Agreed. We'll continue to keep an eye on the MLB. Hopefully, they can get to a resolution sooner rather than later, but it seems like all signs are pointing to the pessimistic side of that thought process. And before I go here today, I would be remiss if I didn't tell you about the Mac Daddy of them all, the Mac Championship. Stay tuned to the Mac Championship. Let's get that trending. Let's get that $4 ticket price up a little bit more. They deserve better ticket prices. Let's get it done. Fletch, for now, my name is Clark Heron, aka the Hairy Hobo, and we're out.
Peace.